Shutterstock, the Great Schism of 1054, a Great Division, July 16th, 1054. Cardinal Humbert of the delegation of the Catholic Church walked into the magnificent Hagia Sophia Church in Constantinople and pressed a document upon the knee of Patriarch Michael the Cerularius, who was about to say a divine service. Then he quickly left the Hagia Sophia as well as Constantinople and headed back to Rome. This letter was abandoned by Humbert and defined the Patriarch excommunicated by the Pope, the Bishop of Rome. Later in the same day, the Patriarch sat a synod and, in his turn, excommunicated his excommunicators. Accordingly, the 16th of July, 1054, was the date upon which the Western and Eastern Church formally separated, and this was the decisive hour to which the name of the Great Schism is given by historians. The real reasons of the division of the two churches are centuries old. During the Middle Ages, the basic conflict between Christian clergy was the problem of the universal supremacy of the Church. The clash for supremacy, Rome versus Constantinople, the bishops of Rome, popes. It was a belief of the Western Church that the supremacy was that of the Western Church, since one of the chief apostles of Christ was believed to be the founder and priest of the Church, and who was martyred in Rome. Peter was the first bishop of Rome according to papacy and their legitimate heirs. In addition, there was also the martyring of St. Paul, who was an important person in spreading Christianity. To the West, that the Roman Church was based on the heritage of these two great martyrs proved its universal authority. The Eastern Orthodox, in turn, based its right to prominence on more secular basis. Constantinople was the seat of the emperor, capital of the empire. The tradition of pre-Christianity was that the emperors were the highest religious authority, and that it went on even after the capital shifted to Constantinople in the 4th century. On the East, the reasoning was simple. The church where the emperor dwelt must of necessity be foremost all others. This competition was not in the merit of their theology, but rather the ambition to power and authority in another, and this made the struggle largely political and not strictly religious. Cultural and theological differences. By 1054, there were many underlying differences between the two churches, both in basic practices and in basic theological belief. Cultural practices. The growing of beards by the clergy was a practice that was instituted in the East and an area not mandated by the West. More importantly, members of the clergy could marry in the Eastern Church, but in the Western Catholic Church, celibacy was applied strictly. The language barrier. The linguistic barrier was created as a result of the cultural boundary that was set by the partition of the Roman Empire in 395. The West and the East were ruled by Latin and Greek respectively, by Latin being the official language of the Western Church and the Greek language of the Eastern Church. Even emperors started using it after the 5th century. Language became an enormous barrier, such that neither could be aware of what the other was arguing about theological issues. Letters dispatched to Rome with Greek characters were never responded to, and letters dispatched to Constantinople in Latin were frequently considered unworthy of translation. The Filioque dispute, the biggest theological conflict, was on the Trinity formula, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit was confirmed to be the proceeding of the Father only, God, by the Council of Constantinople, 381. But the Western Church, in the Council of Toledo, 589, made a unilateral correction of this formula and admitted that the Holy Spirit was the issue of the Father and Son, Jesus. This was added to highlight the significance of Christ. When this transformation became known to the Eastern Church some years later, because of the language barrier, it was declared heretical. Historians called this problem the filioque matter, i.e., and the Son in Latin. Iconoclasm and the rise of the Papal States. Although there had been no rigid hierarchy in early Christianity, subsequent councils introduced 5 great churches, the Pentarchy: Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. Though Rome had initially gained a primacy of honor, the emperors were striving to build up the religious potential of Constantinople by endorsing themselves with other local patriarchs. The iconoclasm of 726, when the Eastern Roman Emperor Leo III forbade image and icon veneration, caused a vehement response in the West by Pope Gregory II. The turning point, however, was the greatest in 751, when Lombards threatened Rome in Italy. The Pope tried to enlist the aid of the Frankish king, Pepin the Short, but could not find assistance with the East. Pepin conquered the Lombards and generously gave to the papacy the great regions of Rome, made up of the Papal States. This made the Pope not only the main religious power of the West, but the leader of a state in central Italy, and this was solidified as the son of Pepin. Charlemagne was crowned emperor by the Pope in 800, a position that further divided the East and the West. The final break, excommunication, the crisis which culminated in the break, started with the Norman conquest of southern Italy. In 1053, Pope declared that Eastern-oriented churches within the area would have to switch to the use of the Latin rites or risk being shut down. Patriarch Michael countered it by directing that all the Latin churches in Constantinople be closed. The next diplomatic expedition, which was headed by Cardinal Humbert, collapsed very quickly. To a great extent, the letter of Humbert that advised the Patriarch to submit himself to the papal authority and his contemptuous attitude towards Michael infuriated the Patriarch, who declined to receive the Roman delegation. Humbert, enraged by the way he was treated, stepped into the Hagia Sophia on the morning of July 16, 1054, and laid the sealed bull of excommunication on the altar and walked away. This was the final catalyst. Under popular sanction, Patriarch Michael excommunicated first Humbert and then the whole Roman delegation. By this act, the East and the West churches were completely cut off. Despite the fact that the Christian peoples were originally cordial towards each other, as time went by, the level of tension grew to a point, and as a part of the Fourth Crusade, in 1204, Latin sack of Constantinople took place. The Orthodox and Catholic Church schism is yet to be resolved.